This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel. No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, the first COVID authoritarian has fallen. The leader of my native New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, beloved by lockdown zealots around the world, including here in the UK, has finally called time on her reign of terror.
I know what this job takes, and I know that I no longer have enough in the tank to do it justice.
But will history remember her as the be kind leader she positions herself to be, or a despot in disguise who brutalised and divided her citizens?
It's been a really important principle for me, empathy. You either get your tests done and make sure you're cleared, or we will keep you in a facility longer.
I'll bid an anything but fond farewell to New Zealand's dear leader Cindy, who must never be criticised in my digest next. Then I'll get the thoughts of my superstar panel, Dominique Samuels, Sean Bailey and Amy Nicole. Should the Prince Harry be forced to sign a non-disclosure agreement to attend the coronation, and perhaps his wife too? Well, the journalist who proposed the idea, Angela Epstein, does battle with historian Dr. Tessa Dunlop and top talent agent Professor Jonathan Shallett in the clash at 9:20. I'll get your verdict too. Plus, have Harry and Meghan proven that the tabloids were right about them all along? One of the defining newspaper editors of a generation, Martin Clark, thinks so. He'll explain why in an exclusive interview at 10:20. And as their popularity slips to a record low in the aftermath of Spare, is this the end of Harry and Meghan's time in the spotlight? My royal masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier, weigh in at 9:45. Also on the show tonight, as his comments about nurses spark controversy, is former Cabinet Minister Simon Clarke right to say that no one paid £35,000 should be using a food bank? We'll debate at 10:30. Is the nation turning a blind eye to the war on dads? One of the nation's most prominent female politicians, Anne Widdecombe, speaks out on this taboo subject at 9:35. Plus, how could Britain countenance electing a man this desperate to become a World Economic Forum lapdog?
Let us just ask you quickly, you have to choose now between Davos or Westminster.
Davos.
I'll bring you more of Starmer's WEF antics and tomorrow's newspaper front pages and the media buzz at 10. We'll have a final Greatest Britain and Union Jackass Name 2. This is Dan Wootton tonight. Let's go. I mean, it's just shocked me today. Here in the UK, especially on the BBC and Sly News, of Jacinda Ardern stepping down. You genuinely think this was the most popular politician in the world leaving her post by choice. But that's not the truth. She was about to be booted from office in a historic election defeat. And I'm going to tell you why in a special digest coming up after the news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you, and good evening to you. Our top story on GB News tonight. Train companies have increased their offer to RMT rail workers, including a minimum pay rise of 9% over 2 years. The Rail Delivery Group says that's its best and final offer they have in order to prevent more strikes. And it's now urging the RMT to put that offer forward to its members for a vote. Also today, the Prime Minister has been defending his levelling up plans, arguing that the most deprived areas of the UK will receive the most of the government's funds. It announced that more than £2 billion will be invested in over 100 projects across the United Kingdom. Labour, though, has criticised the plans, saying London and the southeast of England will be getting most of the money. But Mr Sunak insists that won't be the case.
The northwest is the top region. So the amount of money per person living there, who came top? Northwest. Who came second? Northeast. And actually, if you look down at the other end of the table, you find places like London and the southeast. And the difference is huge. So I think the funding that you're all getting per person out of this levelling up fund is twice per capita what London and the southeast is getting. And that should give you guys the confidence that when we talk about delivering levelling up and spreading opportunity across the country, that we really mean it.
Now, 2 retired Metropolitan Police officers have been charged with child sex offences as part of an investigation into a serving Met Chief Inspector who was found dead. 63-year-old Jack Addis from Perthshire and 62-year-old Jeremy Laxton from Lincolnshire will appear at Westminster Magistrates Court on February the 9th. The Met says the charges follow a lengthy and complex investigation into Richard Watkinson, the 49-year-old, who was found dead in Buckinghamshire last Thursday on the day he was also due to be charged. Now, the actor Alec Baldwin will be charged with involuntary manslaughter over the fatal shooting on set of the film Rust. The cinematographer Helena Hutchins was killed during the rehearsals in the US state of New Mexico when a prop gun that Baldwin was using fired a live round. Mr. Baldwin's lawyer has called the ruling a terrible miscarriage of justice. And here, the King has requested that profits from a £1 billion a year wind farm deal to be used for the wider public good rather than the royal family. King Charles has asked for the profits from 6 new offshore wind farms being developed on Crown Estate land to be redirected to those struggling the most. That comes after His Majesty highlighted the anxiety and hardship of the cost of living crisis in his Christmas message. That's it. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News. Back now to Dan Wootton tonight.
The first COVID authoritarian has fallen. And good riddance it is too to Jacinda Ardern, a China-loving politician who tried to present herself to the world as the epitome of be kind, even during her weepy resignation speech overnight, when her response to the pandemic was anything but compassionate. In fact, it was downright dystopian, nasty and heartless, as she brainwashed her fellow woke disciples, thanks to a compliant media obsessed with her celebrity status, into embracing a zero-COVID prison island while illegally locking out 1 million citizens trapped overseas, no matter how tragic the circumstances, all while demonising the unvaccinated. Contrast how she wants to present herself as she quit this morning compared to the way she governed.
Being a really important principle for me, empathy.
Well, it's almost like, you probably don't see it like this, as two different classes of people. If you're vaccinated or if you're unvaccinated, you have all these rights. If you are vaccinated...
That is what it is, so yep. Do not congregate. Don't talk to your neighbours. Please keep to your bubbles. You can also trust the Director General of Health and the Ministry of Health for that information. Otherwise, dismiss anything else. We will continue to be your single source of truth. If you ask someone of my generation what they believe a politician to be and to name some of the traits, I doubt that they would list kindness. I doubt that they would list empathy. If someone refuses in our facilities to be tested, they have to keep staying. So they won't be able to leave after 14 days. You either get your tests done and make sure you're cleared, or we will keep you in a facility longer. This has been the most fulfilling 5.5 years of my life. Always tried to be kind. I'm going to answer the questions of the accredited media.
Also in the UK.
Sir, I will shut down the press conference if you do not cease.
Well, it's almost like, you probably don't see it like this, as two different classes of people. If you're vaccinated or if you're unvaccinated, you have all these rights. If you are vaccinated...
That is what it is, so yep.
She was crying, by the way, because this wasn't her choice. Ardern was facing a brutal and historic election defeat that would have destroyed her status as a globalist darling. Kiwis are rightly fed up with the economic catastrophe that came from 24-day COVID isolation periods, shocking crime waves and immense division that she has inflicted on my beloved birth country. So yes, I will admit, the end of Ardern's regime is deeply personal to me. I refer to the two-faced politician, actually only half mockingly, as dear leader who must not be criticised. Because when I did call her out in this game-changing column in the Mail Online, this was in January last year, I was even attacked by New Zealand's Speaker of the House, the Ardern ally, Trevor Mallard. And by the way, it's worth pointing out that a few months later, he was forced out of his job because of his inhumane treatment towards anti-Ardern protesters at Parliament, who he pelted with the sprinkler system. So even though I was branded a traitor, I actually have no regrets for speaking out about the horror of Ardern's COVID policy, which included a demonic lottery where passport holders had to apply online to see whether they would be allowed to return home. So that column helped turn the tide in waking New Zealanders up to the fact what Ardern was doing was not normal. And so too did the incredible Charlotte Bellis. Now, she's a brave New Zealand journalist, and I still can't actually believe this happened. She had to seek haven from the Taliban in Afghanistan because she was initially banned from returning to her birth country to have her baby.
The logic here, I hope that Jacinda and other ministers take a step back and say, hang on, this just isn't fit for purpose anymore, and we're putting a lot of Kiwis abroad through a lot of pain.
So it was only being shamed in the international media that prompted Ardern to start making changes. Remember, she had locked the country down for one COVID case and hadn't changed the insane strategy even when the world realised Omicron was just a cold. Thousands of folk completely unnecessarily missed being with loved ones as they died from non-COVID illnesses while locked up in Ardern's COVID prisons, some of which didn't even meet the standards of the United Nations Convention on the Crimes Against Torture. New Zealand is only just starting to recover from this madness. I actually was back earlier this month and businesses are decimated. One company I know broke out in applause when Ardern announced her decision yesterday. But society remains starkly divided. The unvaccinated are rightly still shell-shocked that they lost jobs as paramedics and pharmacists and doctors and police officers and even vets simply for exercising their right to bodily autonomy. Now, I do love my birth country. I'm a proud dual citizen of New Zealand and the UK, as loyal viewers know. But I will not forgive or forget the damage Ardern has caused. I hope and pray now that New Zealand is able to re-embrace important values like freedom of the press, tolerance for bodily autonomy, and the right to always return home now the be kind tyrant is gone. But to respond now, my superstar panel. The political commentator Dominique Samuels, the former Conservative London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and the author and broadcaster Amy Nicol. Now, Dominique, I know for a lot of people watching, probably what I've just said is very shocking, because if they've watched any of the mainstream media here in the UK today, they would think that Jacinda is making this decision as a virtue signalling act, not because she is actually now largely hated in New Zealand because of what she's done to the country.
The media is completely culpable in spreading misinformation, actually, I'll say, about Jacinda Ardern, because the things that she imposed upon her population were just quite simply evil. And for the media, especially the BBC, to gloss over all of that and to act like she was, the second coming of Christ or something, I think is absolutely insulting. But, you know, it's nice that she resigned. It's nice that the tide is turning against her and people like her. But I want to see some sort of accountability, real accountability for the things that she did to her population, most notably people that have lost their lives as a result of her vaccine and lockdown mandates. What she did has cost people their lives. Will she ever be held accountable? I hope so. But, you know, I don't think so.
Well, sure, she won't be held accountable, will she? Because the reason that she's gone now is because she knew that she was going to be thrashed in the election coming up this year, and she wants to be able to go to a cushy job at the World Economic Forum or the United Nations. That's what this is about. There's a master plan here for Ardern.
I mean, it does look like she stepped out of the way of the political bus, because if you look at the numbers in New Zealand, she is not anywhere near as popular. In fact, she's very unpopular. And I think probably in the background, her own party had said to her, if we're going to stand any chance, it'll be without you. So she probably stepped on from those point of view. And actually, you can see it in some of the statements which she made a statement. She said, this is a price, her unpopularity is a price she has to pay for keeping people safe. But that simply isn't true. If people felt like they were kept safe, they'd applaud her for that, and her popularity would go any other direction. But look,
brainwashing only lasts so long, doesn't it? Spreading fear, because that's what she did. She intoxicated the country with a great sense of fear. But actually, New Zealanders aren't stupid. They saw what was happening in the rest of the world, and eventually they woke up and realised we're being wrongly terrified by government propaganda.
Terrorised.
A lot of people in her position, prime ministers, mayors, etc., in the world, they were responding to each other sometimes more than they were responding to their own populations. And I think this is the first result we've seen of that. You know, the population look like they don't want to be around, because actually, if you look at what people are saying about her domestic record, it's non-existent. I spoke to one guy who went on about the amount of gangs in New Zealand, what she did about that. The economic damage has been huge. And actually, he was saying her leaving is the best thing that's happened in some time, which I was quite surprised about, because he started his statement by saying he voted for her. So
crimes out of control, poverty and child poverty, which she said she was going to abolish, is out of control. Amy, are you one of these woke lefties who is obsessed with Ardern?
I think Jacinda Ardern's legacy will go beyond zero COVID. And we should be careful when criticising other nations' approaches to COVID, because those in glass houses, our own wasn't exactly spotless either. I would pick zero COVID over what happened here, the state of the care home, unusable
do you look at China now?
The absolute corruption of Partygate. That is nothing.
What about the corruption that's probably in New Zealand as well?
And when you talk about child poverty, she's lowered child poverty throughout her time in office.
Honestly,
has completely addressed the housing problems in New Zealand, the unemployment rates in New Zealand.
You're reading out Labour Party talking points, Amy. I've just been. What you are saying is completely untrue. Child poverty is up. There is a housing crisis, and businesses are cratering because she locked out immigrants from the country
the statistics
for 2 years.
really do counter your anecdotal evidence in this situation. They do.
I'll say this: if Amy's correct, then she's New Zealand's the only country in the world who weren't affected by a lockdown. You cannot have a lockdown, particularly the type in which she advocated, and it not have an economic effect.
When Jacinda Ardern announced this zero COVID policy, she made it very clear that this would probably have the same financial impact as the 2008 crash. She was very transparent throughout about the impacts that it would have. But the main point, I think, to take from it is that 10 times more people per capita died here in the UK. Surely
that's a complete statistic.
Per capita is actually a really poor way to measure things, because if you look at countries that didn't institute zero COVID madness, like Sweden, they actually have the lowest cumulative excess death tally in the world, and they didn't lock down.
Because that's the thing, you have to look at excess deaths on the whole.
And the other thing, Dan,
and they have record-breaking excess
when
deaths
people
in
do
New Zealand
international
right now.
comparisons, they negate. We are a far larger country. We have far bigger cities. We have a far older population. You have to take all
and we're an
these into
international
account.
travel hub. And actually, Jacinda Ardern locked down the country. I bet you didn't know this, Amy, about a week after Boris Johnson. So she didn't act particularly fast at the start of the pandemic. But I just want to finish, Amy, on this whole concept of kindness. And she always talks about compassion and be kind. Do you think it was compassionate when Jacinda Ardern locked up people who I knew in a government facility as their mother lay dying down the road, and failed to release them from that facility until the next day, and kept them locked up for the week so they were unable to attend their mother's funeral?
No, and I'm not saying that Jacinda Ardern is completely faultless, but I'm saying that her legacy
She's nasty,
goes
isn't
beyond
she?
that. She's not nasty. Every decision she's ever made has clearly been led by empathy and compassion, and that
What is empathetic about creating two classes of people in society?
If you look at her,
where you can't go and get a haircut, can't go to a bar or a restaurant, can't lead your life, can't have a job without injecting yourself with a medical substance.
In the moment, she was not working on her own. She was led by a group of scientists, completely by policies that seemed the best idea at the time. And I think something that she will be remembered by was her response to the Christchurch mosque shooting, where she was fast and decisive and quickly saw to gun legislation, which has altered New Zealand for the better forever.
Amy Nicole, Sean Bailey, Dominic Samuels, my superstar panel, and they are here all night. But later this hour, is the nation ignoring the war on dads? Well, one of our most prominent female political figures, Anne Widdecombe, she's very passionate about this. It's a taboo subject to the media, but she's going to speak out at 9:35. But up next in The Clash, should Prince Harry be forced to sign a non-disclosure agreement to attend the coronation? Journalist Angela Epstein, who came up with this idea, goes head-to-head with the historian Dr. Tess Dunlop and top talent agent Professor Jonathan Shallett. But I want to know what you think. Email me, Dan at gbnews.uk. Tweet us at GBNews, our poll running there too. The Clash, straight after the break.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deems & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Time now for The Clash. After viciously trashing almost every blood relative he has in his memoir Spare, and deranged media appearances too, Prince Harry shouldn't be surprised if King Charles bans him and his vindictive wife from his coronation in May. There's also reportedly genuine and, I think, warranted concern from senior royals that private conversations held around the event could end up in Harry's next grotesque tell-all. But journalist and royal commentator Angela Epstein believes Harry and Meghan should be welcomed at the coronation, but on the strict condition that the Duke of Delusion signs a non-disclosure agreement. Writing in a new column for the Daily Express, she said a commitment of contractual confidentiality not to reveal anything about the coronation and the arrangements surrounding it is a fair and proportionate response to Harry's previous actions. But what do you think? Should Prince Harry be forced to sign a non-disclosure agreement in order to attend the coronation? Dan at gbnews.uk, tweet me at gbnews. You can vote in our poll there too. But first, to debate this topic, I'm joined by the aforementioned Daily Express columnist Angela Epstein, top talent agent Professor Jonathan Shallett, OBE, and the author of Elizabeth and Philip, The Story of Young Love, Marriage and Monarchy, Dr. Tessa Dunlop. So, Angela Epstein, I actually think this is a really sensible idea of yours. How would it work?
Thank you. Well, obviously, greater legal minds than mine would work out how they would ring fence the event. I suppose it would just very clearly specify, as I suppose anybody who works for a celebrity signs a non-disclosure agreement about the fact they can't reveal that, I don't know, Sting puts half fat cream on his cornflakes, or Kylie Minogue likes to have kippers for a tea. The idea would be that anything that connotes to connecting with the coronation, he cannot talk about. And this is not about an argument about free speech. Obviously, it's a cornerstone of our constitution. This is not about muzzling a freedom fighter, as I said in the Express column. Harry fired the first salvo. He has proven that every conversation he's ever had is up for grabs on the public domain, that he wants to monetize it. This is a really, really beautiful occasion. I'm a monarchist. Charles has waited a long time. The British monarchy goes goes back to Anglo-Saxon times. He should be there for all those reasons and because it's his father. But what would be worse, and also because can you imagine how he'd be able to kind of, the amount of horsepower he'd get out of being denied a seat there. He'd really be able to talk at length about that just as Charles was being crowned. But the upshot is he shouldn't be allowed on a personal level to in any way trash this coronation. We're going to have heads of state from all corners of the globe coming. People should be able to sit there, enjoy it, and not worry about what Harry's take is going to be, on this. He has destroyed that level of trust, and I'm afraid this is the only way it has to work.
Jonathan Charlotte, that seems like a fair point to me. I mean, look, in your entertainment industry, all the time you're getting folk to sign NDAs so they have the confidence that actually private conversations can't be used to make money in other ventures. And actually, Harry and Meghan have proven that they will use private conversations to feather their own nest. I mean, Harry even quoted something that King Charles said to him at Prince Philip's funeral in Spare. So surely this is a good idea, Jonathan.
Well, I think if you're playing to the gallery, it sounds like a good idea, but I'm not sure in practice it's a good idea or realistic. First of all, the coronation is a global, national, public event. People throughout the world are going to have opinions on the coronation. Some people are going to love it, some people are going to hate it. So I don't see how you can say to Prince Harry, you can't have an opinion on the coronation when the rest of the world will.
I don't think it's about not having an opinion. I think it's about not sharing private conversations that he has with the royals at the coronation or at events
I don't think you can say to any child in the world or any father in the world, you're going to sign a confidentiality contract with your parents about what you can and can't.
Oh, but it happens with celebrities all the time, Jonathan. You know that. Loads of people, and I bet some of your celebrities, Jonathan, when they date a new person, you know what it's like. Big celebrity goes on a date with someone and they produce a contract and say, sign here or I'm leaving the restaurant. That happens all the time.
It does happen all the time when the celebrity goes on a date or they go out to friends or have professional relationships, but not necessarily with their mum and their dad and their children. You're talking about private conversations that need to take place between Prince Harry, Meghan and their family. They will have to work that out privately as to what they can and can't say, and in time they'll resolve it.
Tessa Dunlop, you are someone who seems to support what Harry and Meghan do. Surely now, if they want to play a part in the coronation, they have to be prepared to sign an NDA, because otherwise you know exactly what's going to happen. And Anne and Edward are both worried about this. Their conversations will end up in the paperback version of Spare.
Do you know what? I think I'm just going to award myself an OBE, a bit like Jonathan's, for sitting through, first of all, your diatribe against Jacinda and kindness, and secondly, attributing to me the identity of supporting Harry and Meghan. What I try to do consistently, week after week, is shed a little more light and a little less heat. And what really saddens
go on,
me,
answer the question then.
Forgive the slightly patronising tone I'm taking now, but I feel sometimes like I have to repeat myself with you and Angela. If you really want the problem of Harry and Meghan to go away, all you have to do is stop talking about it. Today would have been a really good example. There was actually positive royal headlines about King Charles and his billions of pounds offshore.
That's absolute rubbish, because you know that they will come to this coronation and they will share private secrets. You would have called me paranoid a few months ago if I'd said that, but what happened in Spare? They literally shared a conversation from King Charles, words that came from his mouth literally minutes after he buried his own father. So what you're saying is complete rubbish. Can you please answer the question? Should they sign an NDA to come to the coronation or not?
I am suggesting, Dan, you don't need to point at me. I can hear you loud and clear thanks to technology. I am suggesting that we don't need to discuss this. It is totally impractical.
So you're going to refuse to answer the question?
you're misattributing the word coronation, because as Jonathan has so eloquently explained, actually, well, and in fact more broadly, it's very obvious you couldn't prescribe or prevent Harry from describing what the entire world was witnessing.
No, but we're
And
not
if you
talking
read
about
Spare,
that. We're
and
talking
rather-
about
and if you
private
read Spare, you'd have noticed
conversation.
he actually didn't write about his grandmother's funeral, and you can't seek to adjudicate on private conversations between a father and a son. That would just destroy any chance of some kind of domestic reconciliation. So if what you're
Tessa,
suggesting
let me cut in and ask a question. Do you think it was appropriate for him to sue a newspaper that decided to share a private letter that Meghan had sent to her father Thomas, even though, by the way, she wrote that letter knowing full well it was going to be leaked? She's admitted that. But then Harry shared private text messages sent between Kate and Meghan.
I'm just going to use my hairbrush and pretend it's a microphone so you can hear me a little more clearly. I am not an apologist for Harry and Meghan. I think lots of things they've done are inappropriate and damaging. And the poll out today, which is what we should be discussing, if we are, as you've said, genuine royalists, you and Angela, is that both William's popularity has fallen by 8 points, and so too has Harry's by 7. What Harry has done has damaged monarchy. He didn't destroy it, he's damaged it. And I'm suggesting the balm we need to encase our monarchy in, if we want to solve things, can you still hear me, is actually talk a bit less.
But look, can you let
about
Angela
Harry and
respond,
Meghan,
please?
to dial
Let
it
Angela
down,
respond
to
to
not
that.
talk nonsense. I mean, that Express newspaper, if I still bought old-fashioned newspapers, I would line my fire with that article, Angela. You're better than that. That was literally you. You talk about Harry monetizing his
zip
story.
it now.
You were
Zip it now,
monetizing
please. You've
that
got to let other
invented
people
story.
speak. This is called The Clash, so people have to be able to respond. Angela, how do you respond to that?
Right, well, I absolutely adore Tessa as a person. I think she's a lovely person, really is. But in terms of her opinion, certainly the last patronising remark, I have to robustly disagree with. I think the issue is a matter of, if you look at the legal structure of this, excuse me, I'm going to cough. When things are in the public domain, it's a free-for-all. Of course, everybody can comment about it. If I see David Beckham sitting in the middle of the high street having a bag of chips without any attempt to disguise who he is, then I can comment on that. I can take a picture of him, whatever. I couldn't do it with little kids, but obviously I can. We're not talking about the stuff that's going to be out there on the public domain. We're talking about the fact that Harry could say, oh, William's car was shinier than mine, or that when Meghan got there and there was a makeup lady, Kate got first dabs with the blusher brush. Or whatever it is. And what I fear, and Tessa, you should appreciate this as a historian, is that we want this globally significant ceremony to be, beautifully received.
Indeed.
And
Look, I just want to bring Jonathan... No, very good point, Angela. I hear you loud and clear. I just want to bring Jonathan Shaladen quickly to wrap up. Jonathan, obviously you spend your career looking at public figures and sometimes saving their careers or actually working out that it's time for them to call it a day. Now, Tess has just made the interesting point that she thinks that, sure, Harry and Meghan are damaged, but damage has been caused to William and Kate too by this book. Do you agree with that, Jonathan? Who's come out worse?
I don't think anybody's come out of it well, but I think we should contextualise it. I think it's a brief storm, and storms move on. This is not going to damage the royal family in the long run. It's a spat. It's a public spat. The whole world's excited about it. And the dogs bark, the caravan moves on. What I would say to anybody when they talk about NDAs or contracts, only have a contract and an NDA if you can action it. If Prince Harry and Meghan were to talk about something William or King Charles said, King Charles or Prince William are not going to sue Harry and Meghan for saying something about them. It just wouldn't be practical. So the point of an NDA is a completely pointless NDA.
OK.
It makes the public happy.
Well, look, I personally still think it's a very good idea put forward by the Daily Express columnist and royal commentator Angela Epstein. But thank you, too, to Chairman of Intertalent Rights Group and London's leading agent, Professor Jonathan Shallett, OBE, and the royal author, Dr. Tessa Dunlop. So who do you agree with? Should Prince Harry be forced to sign a non-disclosure agreement in order to attend the coronation? handy. I think that should be the condition on which he is allowed to attend. Harry has made it clear to his family that he cannot be trusted. Richard says no, he should sign a non-attendance agreement. Richard, I'd be well up for that, to be honest. And from David, he shouldn't be invited to the coronation at all. His recent comments have turned him into a walking security risk. He can stay in California and watch it on TV. And your verdict is now in. 83% of you agree with this idea from Angela Epstein that Harry should be made to sign a non-disclosure agreement to attend the coronation. 17% of you say he shouldn't. Now, coming up, as we just discussed, their popularity has plummeted to a record low in a bombshell new poll. So is this the end of Harry and Meghan's time in the spotlight? My royal masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier coming up this hour. But first, is the nation turning a blind eye to the war on dads? Well, one of our most prominent female politicians, Anne Widdecombe, is going to speak out on this taboo subject straight after the break.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own news from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere. Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Time for Big Witty Style, and after years of women fighting for equality in society, are the scales really tipping the other way, with men now becoming second-class citizens? Former Conservative Minister Anne Widdecombe thinks so, arguing that fathers in particular are being let down by the very authorities meant to protect them. So recommending a book on one man's struggle to see his children, it's called The War on Dads by Vincent McGovern. Anne says it's men who are now the persecuted sex, and we only need to look at male suicide rates and female employment quotas for proof of that. Now, Anne, in the rest of the media, you know full well this is a pretty much taboo subject, but you passionately believe in this issue. Why is it so important to you, and what do we need to know?
Well, it's important because it's in the interests of both fathers and children that men are treated equally. It's also, of course, there are lots of other areas in which men currently suffer. If somebody makes an allegation against a man, he's immediately referred to as the perpetrator, and the complainant is referred to as the victim, as if the issue's been decided when it hasn't even been investigated. Men suffer from positive discrimination. There are parliamentary seats they can't apply for because it's all women shortlist, and there are boards have quotas and all the rest of it. So a whole variety of different ways men suffer. But this particular book that I've recommended is about men trying to get access to their own children. Now, the courts nearly always, not always, but nearly always award access to them, award custody to the mother, and that I understand. But at the same time, they award access to the father. But all they can do is say what should happen. They don't actually enforce what does happen. And what does happen is that where the breakup isn't amicable, the woman can simply frustrate the man's access. So the court says, this dad must see his children every other weekend, and she will find numerous ways of assuring that he doesn't see his children. Some of them will actually make false allegations in order to try and separate the men from their children. And of course, it's not just the men who suffer, it's the children, because children need their fathers just as they need their mothers. A father isn't an optional extra. A father is vital to a child's growing up.
And I think one of the problems is, Anne, that dads who end up in that situation feel like often they're not being listened to.
Usually they give up. What is different about the man in this book, Vincent McGovern, is that he did not give up. He fought the system all the way through. He got various rulings in his favour from the Ombudsman. He actually forced one change in the law. He fought the system the whole way. But in doing so, I mean, he almost beggared himself in order to do it. He also, I mean, there was obviously the enormous emotional strain on both him and the children. So it is a real lesson in what is going wrong, and nobody will get to grips with it. There was a brief period when Fathers for Justice were very active, and they were shinging up Buckingham Palace and, you know, all this sort of thing, and making a huge splash. And people said, "Oh, what's this about?" And we're beginning to take an interest. But it's something that just nobody gives any priority to. It's all about women, women, women.
So what's the solution, Anne? I mean, does there have to be, for example, a minister for men in government? Should there be lobby groups that maybe aren't considered as extreme as Fathers for Justice? Because I think the problem is, Anne, a bit like a Just Stop Oil or an Extinction Rebellion, they actually ended up turning off a lot of folk with their more dramatic stunts, shall we say.
Yeah, I think they did turn off a lot of people, but it's also true that if they hadn't done those things, there were one or two things I really disagreed with, but if they hadn't done them, they wouldn't have got any recognition for their cause at all. You asked me what the solution is. No, it's not a minister for men. I don't believe in a minister for women. I think that is a nonsense. You know, we're all equal, or we're supposed to be. What I would like to see is effective sanctions in the court. So if a woman denies access in defiance of a court order, because the courts will award access unless the man is dangerous, they will award access. And if the woman then frustrates access, she should have to pay for that. And she should be made to do unpaid community work while the man sees the children. That would soon stop some of them.
Good, practical solution, Anne. I like it. Thank you so much. Big Witty Style back next week. But coming up, have the Tories risked creating yet more division with their proposed U-turn on banning trans conversion therapy, a move that risks criminalising parental conversations about gender? I'll bring you that hot topic in the first of tomorrow's newspapers in the Media Buzz at 10. But first, as their popularity slips to a record low in the aftermath of Harry's memoir Spare, is this the end of Harry and Meghan's time in the limelight? My royal masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier, they're live straight after the break.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Time now for our royal masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier. And despite previously enjoying greater popularity in the US compared to the UK, Harry and Meghan's latest antics have seen them crash to record lows. So a bombshell poll for the Meghan-supporting Liberal publication Newsweek has seen Harry drop 45 points among the US public and the Duchess 36 points in just over a month. The survey of 2,000 Americans was made just days after Harry's tell-all memoir Spare hit shelves worldwide. Meghan is now the least liked royal in the US, ahead of Harry and the Queen Consort. So, wow, Lady C, has Spare and the Netflix docuseries actually ended up being a massive own goal for Harry and Meghan?
Oh, absolutely. But isn't it wonderful? You know, as the Jamaicans would say, you spit in the sky, it falls in your eye. I think it's absolutely splendid. You know, there they were thinking they were going to roll everybody's corpse all the way to the bank, covering themselves in glory and gold, and it's turned out they've covered themselves in something else, which we won't go into.
Phil, do you agree?
Yes, we won't go into that, Dan, I don't think. Yeah, good evening. I mean, the bubble's burst, hasn't it? I mean, I think even young people in America are starting to sort of latch onto them and realise they're a one-trick pony. And young people have got a pretty low boredom threshold these days, haven't they? And I think they're actually getting bored with them. So these polls are very significant. I think we've known that their popularity has plummeted on this side, but for it to do so on the Atlantic, on the other side of the Atlantic as well, my worry is that they might realise this and try to sort of get back into the royal family via the back door, perhaps try and do some work in the Commonwealth, and that is a bit of a worry. We'll end up with a situation where they're half in and half out, which of course is what the Queen tried to avoid. So I do fear that King Charles does have to put his foot down, otherwise they might try and sneak back in.
Well, ADC, that is a genuine concern now, isn't it? Especially seeing that there seem to be a lot of people around King Charles who want him to have some sort of reconciliation meeting with Harry and Meghan before the coronation.
Well, shall I tell you, I'm not entirely convinced that that's not just a fig leaf to cover for the fact that really the King and the Prince of Wales understand what they're dealing with and simply are trying to do it in as decorous a way as possible to avoid a backlash from Harry and Meghan's supporters, or create supporters for Harry and Meghan where none exist. I actually do not think that my understanding is that Charles and William are a lot less gullible and a lot less malleable. And remember, Harry is the one who has flown the kite of, you know, we'll do some work possibly in the Commonwealth. I mean, I have to tell you, I know from various Commonwealth High Commissioners, they don't want Harry anywhere near them after the trouble he caused with those lies about racism in the royal family, because it's caused no end of problems in their countries. And they don't want Harry and Meghan anywhere near them. But this is Harry and Meghan yet again proposing something that they hope will get them half in, half out. I don't think it's going to happen.
Well, it better not happen. Now, look, Harry slammed Jeremy Clarkson as a misogynist this week over a column on Meghan. But I wanted to play you both his own barrage of attacks on women in his shameful new book. Listen to this.
Unlike the other matrons, Pat wasn't hot. Pat was cold. Pat was small. Walking was hard, stairs were torture. She'd descend backwards, glacially. Often we'd stand on the landing below her doing antic dances, making faces. Do I need to say which boy did this with the most enthusiasm? We went on mocking her as she came down the stairs. Who the hell is this editor? Loathsome toad, I gathered. Everyone who knew her was in full agreement that she was an infected pustule on the arse of humanity, plus an excuse for a journalist.
I mean, Lady C, pot kettle, I think Harry is pretty cocky, you might say, or pretty hypocritical to criticise Clarkson, given the way that he speaks about women.
Well, you know, Jeremy Clarkson actually was not being misogynistic. He was making an allusion to a popular series called Game of Thrones. So let's put that in its correct context. While Harry, okay, he was young at the time, but I have to tell you, I've been around children all my life. Some children are cruel and others aren't. You know, there is no way that any child I would regard as desirable would be mocking a matron who had scoliosis. Also, what is so insensitive about Harry's comment is that his cousin Eugenie had scoliosis. And, you know, so it cuts very close to the bone, and it shows that Harry really has no control over his mouth or indeed being a decent person. I think it's outrageous. He is abusive. Harry is very abusive. I don't think there's any way that you can compare Clarkson's allusion to Game of Thrones it was cack-handed. He should have mentioned that it was an illusion. He didn't, but that's an omission. Harry has admissions, and they are admissions of somebody who is cruel and unfeeling. And I'm afraid you don't develop feelings as you get older. You're either born with a heart or without one. That's my take on it.
I mean, Phil, you have to admit there is a real hypocrisy for Harry to constantly talk about compassion and the fact that his life's work is all about being kind, when the book is just full of bile and attacks on people who he doesn't like.
It's yet more hypocrisy, isn't it? Just with the racism row, and he was the racist, now he's the misogynist. It's horrible. It's vile language. What I don't like is the way he uses nicknames for people. He doesn't actually name people. He just refers to them by these horrible names. It's really sort of school bullying stuff, isn't it?
I'm the sad little man, Phil. I'm the sad little man.
What you're
not my darling.
I don't think I'm, but quite a few other journalists are, and it's just very, very unpleasant, and it shows a really nasty streak that he's got, I'm afraid.
Yeah, no, personally, I think it's a compliment because if Harry likes you, you're usually a pretty bad person. That's what I've worked out over the past few years. Look, fascinating analysis as ever. Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier, top royal authors, and our royal masterminds. They're back next week. But coming up, have the Sussexes proven that the tabloids were right about them from the start? Well, one of the defining newspaper editors of a generation, Martin Clark, thinks so. He's going to explain why in an exclusive interview at 10:20. But first, have the Tories risked creating yet more division with their proposed U-turn on banning trans conversion therapy, a move that risks criminalising parental conversations about gender? My superstar panel debate that, and we'll deliver the first of tomorrow's newspapers in the Media Buzz. We're back in just 2 minutes' time.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, after putting on a united front to stare down Nicola Sturgeon's dangerous gender reform bill this week, does a proposed Tory U-turn on banning trans conversion therapy risk dividing the party again? I debate that move, which critical MPs say could criminalise parental conversations about gender, with my superstar panel next. Tonight, I'm joined by Dominique Samuels, Sean Bailey and Amy Nicol. Also coming up, has Prince Harry's fantasy-fueled memoir proved the tabloids were always right about him and Meghan? Well, one of the UK's most prominent editors during their time in the royal family, Martin Clark, speaks out on the Sussexes' assault on Britain's free press. You won't want to miss that exclusive interview at 10:20. Has the Jeremy Clarkson cancellation for Rory proven that humour is dead? And how can he save his career from being torched by the rabid Sussex squad? Man of the people, Charlie Lawson, gives his no-nonsense take at 10:45. Plus, the whole world's talking about Clarkson, but has he got some rare support from his neighbours?
I would just accept the apology and be on your way.
But he shouldn't lose his job.
No.
More of that coming up in the media buzz. And as his comments about nurses spark controversy, is former Cabinet Minister Simon Clarke right to say that no one paid £35,000 should be using a food bank? That's our big debate then as well. Plus, Slippery Starmer exposes his true colours as he rubs shoulders with globalist elites at the World Economic Forum.
Let us just ask you quickly, you have to choose now between Davos or Westminster.
Davos.
Well, you can stay there, mate, as far as I'm concerned. Tomorrow's newspapers and a new Greatest Britain Union Jackass coming up too. Up but first, the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you. Good evening. The top story on GB News: train companies have increased their offer to RMT rail workers, including a minimum pay rise of 9% over 2 years. The Rail Delivery Group says it's the best and final offer they have in order to prevent more strikes. It's now urging the RMT to put the offer forward to its members for a vote. Lancashire Police is reportedly looking into a video of Rishi Sunak not wearing a seatbelt while working in a moving car. Video shows the Prime Minister not using the safety device while filming a social media clip. He has apologised, with his spokesman saying he made an error of judgment. In the UK, the offence can be punished with fines of up to £500. Well, today the Prime Minister has been defending his levelling up plans, arguing that most deprived areas will receive most government funds. It announced more than £2 billion will be invested in over 100 projects across the UK. Labour, though, has criticised the plan, saying London and the South East will be getting most of the money. But Mr Sunak insists that won't be the case.
The North West is the top region. So the amount of money per person living there, who came top? North West. Who came second? North East. And actually, if you look down at the other end of the table, you find places like London and the South East. And the difference is huge. So I think the funding that you're all getting per person out of this levelling up fund is twice per capita what London and the South East is getting. And that should give you guys the confidence that when we talk about delivering levelling up and spreading opportunity across the country, that we really mean it.
Rishi Sunak. Now, 2 retired Metropolitan Police officers have been charged with child sex offences as part of an investigation into a serving Met Chief Inspector who's been found dead. 63-year-old Jack Addis from Perthshire and 62-year-old Jeremy Laxton from Lincolnshire will appear at Magistrates Court in Westminster on February the 9th. The Met says the charges follow a lengthy and complex investigation into Richard Watkinson, the 49-year-old who was found dead in Buckinghamshire last Thursday, on the day he was also due to be charged. And finally, Britain's Andy Murray fought back from 2 sets down at the Australian Open tonight after the longest tennis match of his career. He defeated Thanasi Kokkinakis in the second round, with the contest lasting 5 hours and 45 minutes. It's the second latest finish for a match in Australian Open history. The epic showdown ending at 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 past to be precise. That's it from me. You're up to date on TV, online and radio. Back now to Dan Wootton Tonight.
Time for tomorrow's news tonight, now in our media buzz. I've just been handed the first front pages. Lee Anderson isn't around, so The Guardian hasn't been ripped up yet tonight. Let's have a look at it. It reports that Tory constituencies have been allocated significantly more money than others from the government's £4 billion Levelling Up Fund. The Metro leads with public anger that PM Rishi Sunak has taken private flights to destinations close to London, like Blackpool. His team have defended the journeys, saying it wouldn't be practical to travel on the notoriously unreliable West Coast train line. And The Star has splashed on the story of a bus driver Elvis tribute act aiming for a #1 single. OK. Good on him. My superstar panel, back with me now, political commentator Dominic Samuels, former Conservative London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and the author and broadcaster Amy Nicol. Now, on Tuesday, the government, led by Scottish Secretary Alistair Jack, stood up to Scheming Sturgeon and her dangerous gender recognition reform bill. However, among the Commons benches, a select group of Tories are lobbying the party collective to ensure the protection of women's rights and vulnerable teens. This conflict is centred around the proposed ban on trans conversion therapy, which pro-trans Conservative MP Alicia Kearns, an ally of Penny Mordaunt, has propelled to the forefront of the government's agenda. However, dozens of backbenchers are said to be opposed to the ban unless it includes safeguards to protect parents. That view was echoed by the Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch, who wrote to all Tory MPs insisting that parents must not be criminalised for having legitimate conversations with their children about whether they really want to change gender. So, Dominic Samuels, it feels like this is one step forward and two steps backwards in terms of the protection of women, but especially in this case, vulnerable teenagers.
Yeah, and it's because we have some very severely delusional people within the Conservative Party that seem...
Stop talking to about Sean like that.
Delusional, really delusional, and actually dangerous, the things that they're saying. Basically suggesting that medical professionals and parents should be criminalised. Suggesting that maybe there are other routes that you can take as a young person that don't include legally changing your gender, pumping yourself with hormone blockers, and taking
Amy's saying they're not saying that.
It's fundamentally not. The only divide in the Conservative Party right now is those who understand what's going on and those who want to conflate the issue with toilets and changing rooms.
Are completely interconnected, and this is the problem.
No, they're not.
Like you, in your fairy world, people that take advantage of the system don't exist. This problem has arisen from Scotland and changes to the gender recognition bill. All of the safeguards that we seek to protect women, to protect women's spaces, whether that's in prisons, toilets, nonsense. Schools, were voted down. And the reason for that was that they didn't want the narrative to be that trans people are criminals. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that people exist that take advantage of the system, and we've seen that use the label trans to access women's spaces to fulfil their own sick sexual fantasies, and women should be respected and protected.
I think you've fundamentally you've misunderstood exactly what the GRA and the gender recognition certificate really is. All it is to do with your birth certificate. When's the last time you showed your birth certificate to anyone?
So let's connect some dots, because you seem to be unable to do that. If you are able to legally change your gender, change your birth certificate, that means by law you have to be treated exactly the same as a biological woman. Dominic, that means you can have access to female spaces, like prisons, like toilets, like schools,
Rewind.
like sports
that
facilities.
Was handled very promptly in the 2010 Equalities Act. The changing rooms argument, the women's spaces argument, that's not happening anymore. That's not what this is about.
Well, Sean, which side of the party are you on?
What seems to happen here, there's a number of Conservative MPs that were concerned about would women's spaces be protected, would people who are not adults or have their gender physically altered, and that's why they...
Nothing to do with that. This is so frustrating.
Amy, how is it nothing to do with
because
it?
This is about
being legally recognised as another sex, Amy.
It's about admin. It's about paperwork. It's about taking that final step. When you already have a gender, you already have a passport that says you're a woman. That's a driving licence. Right. The only thing it affects is your birth certificate, which basically affects when you can get married and what it says in your death certificate. Don't say no, because that is correct.
What Amy's forgetting thing, right? There's two things with the law. Firstly, it's the first step. Where's the next step?
No, that step was in 2010. That step's gone. They're already in your toilet. Sorry to break it to you.
MPs were concerned about. The second piece is as well. Once you are identified as a woman, it means organisations can't keep women's spaces clear. Because what we're talking about here, we are talking about what trans people want, that's fine, but also what do women want? Women might want that situation some other way and need to be protected. Please, Amy, let me finish.
You're not talking about the current situation
what these Conservative
whatsoever.
MPs were really concerned about is the changes to women's spaces, etc. And also, which I think is a really important piece, you cannot criminalise parents for having conversations with their children. When you have a child, you are legally responsible for the welfare of that child. So how can your child go through this big change and you not be involved in the conversation?
Well, indeed, because Amy, I think if we focus in on that
on
point,
the gender
which is
conversion point.
which is what you're particularly concerned about. Do you not understand that for young people, for example, Carabelle, who has been on this show, who I've spoken to, who sued the Tavistock Clinic,
and then
the
appealed,
huge risk. Yes, but the Tavistock Clinic is now closed because the Conservative government has decided it's dangerous. But let me finish the point and then you can respond.
We need more regional centres.
Let me finish the point and then you can respond. So for someone like Carabelle, she was so young when she started completely life-changing medical procedures to transition her from a woman to a man. Now, actually, what she realised, and this is happening, by the way, for many, many people who want to transition young, what she realised is that actually this was about her sexuality. It wasn't about gender. She should never have had these life-changing treatments, which have completely destroyed her physically because you can't reverse the impact. And the issue is, Amy, now under this law, potentially people in her life, counsellors, medical professionals, maybe even her parents, would be banned from having conversations with her about this.
That's not at all what would happen. And actually, I'm not trying to invalidate the experience of detransitioners. They're completely valid experiences, just like there are people who have regrets over abortions. That's not how we make our laws about abortions. We make the laws based on the majority experience. And that's what's happening here. In the Cass report, it identifies...
But you must see the trends are changing, though.
So with the cases of detransition or healthcare that wasn't correctly applied, or, like you said, it can get confused with sexuality. That's all true.
But Dominique, that's happening all the time
let me finish
now.
this point. That is all true. And that's why gender identity clinics need to be rolled out and more readily available because they deal with that. And one of the main things I took from reading the Cass report in full is that at that stage, it's that quick access to the healthcare which differentiates between those struggling with their sexuality and those who are genuinely trans.
But you're also still defending the Tavistock.
But the bill would restrict professionals from having that conversation. So I think, Amy, you've missed the point. And the deeper thing here, you made the point that we don't make our laws on the reality of one or two people. Well, actually, there's a much larger group of people, women, 51% of the population, who are nowhere to be seen in this bill. And what the Conservative MPs were saying was, we just need to stop, pause, so that we can make sure that women's spaces are respected.
Conservative MPs have been looking at this since 2017. The work of an MP like Alicia Kearns is a brilliant example of what happens when you thoroughly look at this and you understand it. And there is no way that you could go against conversion
Amy, I have to say, I think it's quite patronising.
I think
it's quite patronising when the left say, because we disagree with you, oh, we're so thick, we're so stupid, we don't understand the point.
It's not.
Well, that is what you're saying.
Half the country.
If we disagree with you, we're so thick, we must not understand the point. We understand the point, we just disagree.
No.
We understand the point because
all
we
three of you have sat here and not known what the GRC actually is. So, I do think you're a bit ignorant on that.
That is not true at all.
You've conflated it. You've all conflated it with women's spaces.
You are not using logic.
Hold on.
Sorry, when you can legally change your gender, when you are legally recognised as another sex, or it's not just about the birth certificate, it's about how the law responds to it, which means legally you have to be treated as that biological
That's happened
sex.
with
Are
the
you
20...
stupid?
You're saying, am I stupid?
Are you genuinely stupid? Because you're not understanding it, and that's why it doesn't protect female spaces.
2010 we have had these in place since. You are talking about the Equalities Act gave transgender women the access to all the spaces...
To make it legally, to make it easier to legally change your gender without a diagnosis of gender dysphoria.
Final word to Sean. Final word to Sean. I'm sorry.
How can she sit here and say, am I stupid? How can you allow that on your programme?
Hold on, she's asked a question.
Am I stupid?
Yes, but you also said that we didn't understand the point.
Because you clearly don't. You're conflating it. You're all three of you are conflating it with women's spaces. It's nothing to do with women's spaces.
I don't think we should throw personal insults around at all, but you did say that if we disagreed with you, that we've misunderstood, and I find that quite patronising.
If you're conflating
what?
The GRC,
Right,
a gender recognition
No.
certificate. I've already explained it. I've explained it.
So the gender recognition certificate means that you can legally change your sex on your birth certificate, right? Without a diagnosis of gender dysphoria.
Which is something that Theresa May's government agreed that the first thing that needs to be removed is the medicalisation.
Completely irrelevant.
Dan, you live as a gay man. You are a gay man. Does that have to be medicalised?
No, but that totally...
That's something innate.
And if you don't understand that there's a real difference between sexuality and gender identity, then I actually feel it's you who's missing the point.
What I'm saying is
Dan,
it's innate. It's something that you don't need to be told by a doctor.
The point that Amy has misunderstood is that the gender recognition bill lowers all of this to the age of 16. And the point that Dominique is trying to make, the law in England will respond to you differently if you are legally a woman. And the worry is you'll then have access to surgery, etc.
You already do. You already do. How old were you when you realised your gender?
I was born the way I am.
Oh, that's funny, because that matches exact experiences.
But no, but I think, I think you're missing the point between gender identity and biological sex.
Can we just agree on one thing, that we do need to take the heat out of this debate, because it's increasingly toxic. Look what's just happened here.
We didn't do a very good job of that tonight. Look, let's move on, because the World Economic Forum's annual summit has coaxed a mob of the elite to the Swiss ski resort of Davos this week, including mainstream media barons, business bigwigs, government leaders and slippery Starmer. And the leader of the opposition has even admitted today that he prefers the globalist fest in Davos to life-serving Brits in Westminster. Watch.
Let us just ask you quickly, you have to choose now between Davos or Westminster?
Davos.
Why?
Because Westminster is too constrained. And, you know, it's closed and we're not having meaning. Once you get out of Westminster, whether it's Davos or anywhere else, you actually engage with people that you can see working with in the future. Westminster is just a tribal shouting place.
OK, you just stay there. You stay there, Keir. You enjoy your time with the globalists and Davos. Starmer also had the cheek to have a dig at Rishi for not ditching the country to be a WEF lapdog. Look, I actually think if you prefer schmoozing in Switzerland to doing real work in Westminster, then it's a real worry that you want to be our next Prime Minister. I don't think Mr Starmer has his priorities right. Amy Nicole, Sean Bailey, Dominic Samuels, do stand by, because coming up is former Cabinet Minister Simon Clarke right to say nobody earning £35,000 needs to resort to food banks. My superstar panel return for that in Media Buzz, the sequel, at 10:30. But first, have the revelations in Spare proven the British tabloids were right about him and Meghan all along? Fleet Street heavyweight and former newspaper editor Martin Clark has his say. He's live with me straight after the break.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8". My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Now, the Liberal media have fawned over Prince Harry's attacks on the British press and his bid to control the headlines, but perhaps one of the most overlooked aspects of the revelations in Spare is that the dictator of Sussex admits on multiple occasions that newspaper reports about him that were, by the way, denied at the time were actually correct. For example, the press was right about Harry's repeated drug use, which started as a teenager, and reporters like myself were on the money when we wrote about the tensions between the Fab Four, plus Meghan Markle's alleged bullying of palace staff, still being asserted by people involved, despite Harry's attempts to muddy the waters. Well, after an astonishing 38-year career in journalism, my next guest is ideally placed to respond to the Prince's smear campaign. Martin Clark is one of Britain's most prominent editors, having edited the Daily Record, The Scotsman, and launched the hugely successful Mail Online. And I'm delighted to say that he joins me now. So, Martin, obviously Harry is launching this attack on the British press, and he effectively is now admitting that he wants to police and change the British press, which he views as the devil, and we'll come to that in a moment. But in all of his attacks on the British press, as you point out, actually, perhaps the thing that is most overlooked is the fact that time and again he reveals that stories that were denied publicly at the time were actually completely true.
Yeah, and you gave some of the best examples yourself, and you're the man who's the expert on that because you wrote a lot of those stories.
And they were certainly denied at the time.
Yes, yes. And there's the wonderful passage in the book where, in the run-up to the famous dog bowl fight with William, where he accuses William, when William's accusing Meghan of being, a bully and a troublemaker and upsetting everybody, and says, "Oh, you're just parroting the stuff you read in the press." Sorry. that is so backward, it boggles the mind. Because obviously William was there. William saw it, presumably at first hand, or heard first-hand accounts from the people involved, and yet Harry's blaming the press. And this is the real contradiction at the centre of the book. Because on the one hand, Harry, hates the press. We're the big boogeyman of his entire existence, of his entire life. But equally, he at the same time is attacking, William and Camilla for leaking stories about him that he doesn't deny. He doesn't deny these stories are true. So he can't have it both ways. The press can't, on the one hand, be people who make things up, and then at the same time, all they're doing is printing stuff that his own family, he claims, are leaking about him.
And with the William case, by the way, I think that's a really pertinent example, because what he failed to mention is that actually William had made his own judgment about Meghan before a single word was published in the British press about any disagreements between the four of them, because actually for a long time they fooled us, right? It wasn't until November 2018 when I actually wrote the first story that said, and I remember it very clearly, Kate and Meghan had fallen out over the way that Meghan was treating staff members at Kensington.
Yeah, but it turns out they actually...
By that point, they hated each other.
Never hit it off in the first place. Yeah. And when you look back at some of the stuff that we all wrote and printed, it's kind of embarrassing that we were fooled. Sucked in. So comprehensively. They were talking about the Fab Four, and it was like it was more like the behind the scenes of Let It Be than Hard Day's Night or something like that. It was all, and this is what I think people don't understand about the press, is the press work really hard. Especially the tabloid press, work really hard to get things right. Not because we're worried about getting sued and having to pay out lots of money, but because getting it wrong is really embarrassing when you find out a year or 2 years or even 10 years down the line that what you wrote was nonsense. And that Fab Four stuff, it was just pure propaganda. And they were never a Fab Four.
Briefed, by the way, by royal press officers working for Harry and Meghan, even though he seems to hate this briefing so much. But look, what I think is actually more important here, Martin, though, is actually his chilling bid to censor us now. And this is actually very serious, and usually folk on the left and the wokerati who love Harry and Meghan would be deeply concerned about a highly privileged individual born into the British royal family, a multi-millionaire trying to control what is published in the free press. But because it's Harry and Meghan, actually, a lot of people are embracing this push for censorship.
Well, Liberals don't mind the press being controlled so long as they're not controlling the Liberal press. Yeah, the Liberal press can do what they want. And this is why, if it was just some royal crank, on a hobby horse about the press, who cares? Yeah, but the trouble is, Harry's pushing at a very open door here. You mentioned Davos in your last segment about Starmer, and this week at the WF, they've been in Davos. They've been talking about how disinformation is, a grave threat to democracy and the liberal West. They don't seem to care about the loss of free speech being a threat to democracy. And this is, in America, we've had over the last couple of years, we've had most of the American newspapers ignoring the Hunter Biden laptop, which was labelled as Russian disinformation, turns out to be totally true. Suppressed by social media. In this country and America, you had people hounded out their jobs for saying the wrong things about the trans issue and about COVID. And this is why disinformation is one of Harry's favourite words. But one month's disinformation is next month's truth. And
well, of course, the lab leak theory being a great example of that.
Perfect example.
Or some of the side effects connected to the vaccine.
So this is why, Harry just tarring the press as irresponsible and wrong most of the time is not only factually incorrect, it's really, really, really dangerous.
What about how the woke Hollywood corporations seem to be absolutely enthralled by Harry and Meghan? I mean, we've seen this week Jeremy Clarkson, and I don't know what you think specifically about his column, but personally, look, I thought probably it wasn't a wise column, it was a misunderstood joke relating to Game of Thrones, and probably we now know he's admitted it was a mistake, but we all make mistakes. He's written 5,000 columns, right? I've made mistakes. What's fascinating to me, he's a big star, Martin, right? He's a big star. He's been a moneymaker for ITV. He's relaunched Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, which was completely dead as a format. But because it's Harry and Meghan who have complained about him and they are such royalty in Hollywood, it really does look like he is on the verge of cancellation from mainstream TV.
It's deeply alarming, particularly since he's admitted his mistake. But that's not good enough for Harry and Meghan. They don't just want him to admit that mistake, they want to admit that everything he writes is misogynistic and hateful. I don't think they'll be happy until he ends up in a gutter somewhere. And you say Harry and Meghan are riding high. We'll see how long that lasts with the woke corporations if their popularity continues to decline. Obviously, the book's been a massive seller. The Netflix interviews were massively watched, so that's 2 wins. But how much longer can they keep this up? I mean, how much more dirty washing have they got to wash and that they're prepared to wash?
But isn't the damage done by the Clarkson thing? And I'll explain, because, look, obviously, you were a brave editor, but most editors, most broadcasters, most reporters, most TV presenters, right, they just want to stay in a job. And so why now would any of them take the risk of doing either original journalism that criticises Harry and Meghan in some ways or commentary about Harry and Meghan when you think that there is a realistic threat that your bosses won't stand by you if Harry and Meghan complain?
Yes, and for most editors or the equivalent of editors in television, you've got two, when it comes to a columnist, you've got 2 roles. One is to protect them from themselves sometimes and say, no, you shouldn't say that, yeah? And they might sometimes push back and there'll be an argument, but at least you've told them, look, I think this is a very silly idea. And yet at the end of the day, you can actually say, well, I'm not going to print that. The other duty you owe them is to have their back when it does all go pear-shaped. And yes, and some of his bosses seem to be not exactly standing up for him. And that is frightening. Because if a big beast like Clarkson, and they don't come much bigger or brilliant, quite frankly, in everything else he's done, then who is safe? Yes, you're quite right.
Well, no one.
No one.
No one. If Clarkson can be cancelled at the behest of Harry and Meghan, anyone can be cancelled. And I think what's so shocking about this, and this is obviously why I very much believe in the importance of a freedom of speech channel like GBNews, is that actually these TV presenters, these journalists, they're all having conversations on their WhatsApp groups that they are no longer prepared to share with their viewers or their readers. And to me, that censorship is actually becoming so overwhelming in so many parts.
What's really sad is it's not just confined now to broadcasters and writers. That's how it is in real life. Yeah, there are things that people will say on WhatsApp to their nearest and dearest and their closest friends that they wouldn't dare say in the office. Not particularly because it's deeply offensive. A year or 2 ago, it would have been perfectly unremarkable. But now it's safe to keep your mouth shut.
OK, so to wrap up then, how do the royal family and the British press, how should they fight back against Harry and Meghan's attacks?
It's one thing I'd like to say is if you read the book, and I have read the book, God help me.
Me too.
And you do end up at the end feeling very sad for everybody. Including Harry. The man has not had a happy life. He's still not happy in his own skin, and you can't, and particularly with the tragic loss of his mother, you can't but feel sorry for him. And I genuinely hope he does find some happiness in Montecito with his new life. And you equally feel heartbroken for the royal family, although I think, when you see how Harry ended up, and you do wonder over and over, did no one see where this lad was going wrong? I mean, God forbid the worst had ever happened and the spare had actually had to step up as the heir. Was he remotely suited for that, either intellectually or in temperament? I don't see it. So, the royal family have got their questions to answer. I mean, I guess if he has got the material for another book, then maybe the royal family will offer him a way back or some kind of reconciliation, if out of nothing but fear. But then how can they? Because how could they have him at dinner and they'd be like one of the people I just talked about, WhatsApping each other under the table, saying the things that they daren't say in front of Harry and Meghan in case they got cancelled for it.
No, it's an impossible situation.
It is an impossible situation.
Martin Clark, so great to have you. Thank you.
My pleasure.
But coming up, Jeremy Clarkson, as we just discussed, is facing cancellation while Just Stop Oil pests dodge jail time. How on earth is that fair? It's another woke week, and our man of the people, former Corrie star Charlie Lawson, will try and make sense of it all at 10:45. But first, as former Cabinet Minister Simon Clarke comes under fire for insisting a salary of £35,000 should be enough to avoid the food bank. Is he right? My superstar panel debate that when the Media Buzz returns straight after the break.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere. Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Let's return to tomorrow's news tonight now in our Media Buzz. More front pages now. The Eye report that EU leaders want Starmer to become British PM. No kidding! No kidding! Because he wants us back in the EU. Of course they want him back. Oh, that's like a no-sugar Sherlock sort of story. The Sun's headline, no one is above the law. That's following today's news that Hollywood actor Alec Baldwin will be charged with involuntary manslaughter over a fatal shooting on a film set in 2021. And the Daily Mirror reports that a Met Police chief and 2 retired officers have been accused of being involved in a paedophile ring, with a serving chief inspector found dead on the day he was charged with child sex offences. My superstar panel back with me now, political commentator Dominique Samuels, the former Conservative London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and the author and broadcaster Amy Nicole. Now, Tory MP Simon Clarke has today doubled down on comments suggesting Brits earning £35,000 a year, the approximate average annual salary of nurses who still rely on food banks, are mishandling their money. While the former Left-Lean Up secretary tweeted he has, quote, huge respect for public sector workers, he stood by a local radio appearance yesterday in which he told struggling people earning the sum, which is about £7,000 more than the average UK annual salary. Quote, something is wrong with your budgeting. Pat Cullen, you know, she's from the Royal College of Nursing. Obviously, she wasn't happy. She called the comments disgusting, heartless and dangerously out of touch. Nearly 1 in 5 nurses who command a starting salary of around £27,000 when newly qualified claim to have used a food bank in a survey published in October. Clark's successor, Michael Gove, also weighed in on the row. Look.
I know what the individual concerned was trying to say. I know that he's a very good-hearted and generous-minded person, but I think in the phraseology, the wrong message came across.
But Clark has found support in the shape of fellow Tory MP and friend of our show, Lee Anderson. After declaring he knew of constituents who earn less but are able to budget well enough to be self-sufficient, Lee tweeted a photo of a staff member named Katie, who, as Twitter gleefully mocked, is single, in debt and on less than £30,000, claiming she made his point really well, as she does not rely on food banks and is actually able to save money. And Sean Bailey, this is where I just lose the plot with media pylons. Because to me, it's actually a very uncontroversial point to say that if you are making £35,000 a year, £7,000 above the average wage, you've either got a gambling problem, a drug problem, an alcohol problem, or a budgeting problem if you have to use food banks. Because look, I say this as someone who was earning £16,000, you know, in my first journalism job. Not actually surprising long time ago, and I know it was tough to survive, but it's possible to survive.
Look, the problem is, in this current climate, people who are earning fairly good money are struggling. What the conversation is actually, it's put it into stark relief. Nurses are above average national salary, so if they're on food banks, that means at least 50%, probably more, of other people should be in food banks. So people who earn less will start to ask themselves slightly different questions.
Yeah, but £35,000, right? That's £7,000 above our average salary.
But after all, before tax.
Yeah, but Dominique, that's before tax. But Dominique, seriously, if you're earning £35,000, and unless you have the problems that I just mentioned, big alcohol problem, big drug problems, big gambling problems, you should be able to survive without going to the food bank. And that's all Simon Clark was saying. And actually, what's wrong with saying that we should help people with budgeting?
Simon Clark was talking crap. And the reason why he was talking crap is because you need to factor in the inflation that his government is responsible for. Now, this inflation affects food prices, it affects mortgage prices, it affects childcare costs, energy prices. That is a major chunk out of someone's wages. Then you've got to factor in... You've got... Let me just list it. Let me just list it. You've got to factor in income tax, national insurance. So when you calculate that with a tax code that a nurse is likely to have, that's £27,800 a year, which is about £2,300 a month. Then you've got to take into consideration council tax rises and the fact that they actually have to increase their contributions to their pension.
Yes,
so when you factor in
using food banks,
but when you factor in all of these things and factor in the fact that these costs are rising exponentially, it's not crazy to suggest that a nurse who has a mortgage and the mortgage payments are increasing, has children, and when you factor in all of these costs, doesn't have that much left, so may have to supplement the fridge with food banks. I don't think that's a crazy suggestion.
Yeah, but it's also not crazy, in my opinion, Amy, to be talking to people about budgeting. Why are we so easily offended? Actually, lots of people do not know how to budget, do not know how to use your money, and actually it's really important that we start talking about this because this problem isn't going away.
I think we're talking about two separate things. Yeah, there is definitely an argument for some financial education. I think that would be a good thing to add into the curriculum.
Because £35,000 is above what most people in this country earn.
Is that
most people in this country are not using food banks.
But I think that almost makes the point even better, that an above average wage currently is not enough to deal with the cost of living.
Well, if you believe this survey, and I
would argue is a big responsibility of this government, and it makes it even more ironic that what's his name, Simon Clark, he'd rather blame frittering personal responsibility over
was trying to help. Listen, I've got to say,
I think that's really short-sighted.
Come on, final word, Sean. Amy's here making all kinds of political points, and that's where this is a rubbish debate. He was talking about what people need to survive in this country, and he was merely making the point there's people who earn less who make more. We have to have a conversation about what we pay people. It may well be that they get paid more, but the fact that we can't have this conversation without it being a political pylon is a problem for the country.
And I completely agree, because look, you know, I've been saying for weeks and weeks and weeks, nurses need to be paid more, teachers need to be paid more. We also have to be incredibly careful with these public sector wage hikes that we don't cause this inflation spiral.
But we were really happy to cause that inflation by creating fake money, and now all of a sudden we need to manage inflation.
You know how much I spoke out against that, and that is a whole other topic. But I do believe that we have to start talking about the need for people at the moment, especially, to be careful with how they spend their money.
We're going to have to in this current climate.
It's about relativism as well.
Of course.
You've got to talk about who gets paid what and why.
Yeah,
it's important.
Now, look, finally, the whole world is talking about Jeremy Clarkson, but what do his neighbours think of his row with the Sussexes? Locals near his home in Oxfordshire have been at loggerheads with the TV motormouth in recent months over the surging popularity of his diddly squat farm shop and restaurant. But our senior producer, Ben Leo, went to find out if they had any sympathy for Clarkson's latest battle, a showdown with cancel culture.
Do you think Harry and Meghan should have accepted his apology, his two apologies, in fact?
I think they should.
Definitely, because all the lies and everything that she's told.
Clarkson's always been, shall we say, rude.
I think he generally, he's put Chaplington on the map as well. Nobody'd ever heard of Chaplington until he went there, so...
I think he has said things like this too often, and he clearly says things to be controversial. I'm not a big fan of people being cancelled.
Should he lose his ITV and Amazon job over it? Is that fair? Is cancel culture the way we should go?
We live in a blame society, don't we? Everybody's blaming everybody.
Because I think Who Wants to Be a Millionaire was... It's been a better show since he's been on there. I never thought anybody could be better than Chris Tarrant.
I would just accept the apology and be on your way.
But he shouldn't lose his job.
No.
Jeremy might not be here, but his milk machine's working. It's the cow juice vending machine where you can get a litre of milk for £1.20.
So for once, Clarkson's neighbours are supporting him. He will be very relieved. Coming up, strap in for Greatest Britain Union Jackass, where we'll debate whether Rishi Sunak's seatbelt gaffe is worthy of a police investigation. Let me tell you right now, it's not. But also on the way, has the Clarkson foray proven how dangerous it is to make a joke? Man of the People and Corrie star Charlie Lawson joins me straight after the break for that and more as he breaks down a very woke week.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Time now for Uncancelled. And this is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. Clearly, the sackings of Piers Morgan and Sharon Osbourne back in 2021 weren't enough for Harry and Meghan because the vengeful couple have another target in their sights after they slammed Jeremy Clarkson's well-meaning apology. The media storm surrounding the Clarkson's farm and Who Wants to Be a Millionaire presenter is gathering speed, with Amazon and ITV reportedly considering cancelling the broadcasting bigwig at the behest of the Sussexes. Well, to look at the woke week, I'm joined tonight by our man of the people, Charlie Lawson. Charlie, is Clarkson going to be cancelled?
Well, I think given the current climate, Dan, you're probably right. Unfortunately, these companies, although they're massive and what have you, they will bow to the minority pressure groups because they're very vocal and they're very good at being noisy, if you see what I mean. Of course he shouldn't be, for God's sake. Jeremy is Jeremy. This is the man who whacked Piers Morgan, for God's sake, So he's, he says what he does for effect. He knows what he's doing, all this. In this case, I have to say, Dan, I did read this and I've been around many blocks and even I sort of went, oh, steady on here, Jerry, son. But look, What I know, manners maketh a man and all that, but he did have the good grace to apologise, a very fulsome apology, and it should be forgotten. But as we've said before, Harry and Meghan are making dickheads of themselves now. I wish they'd just shut up, honour their contracts, and just be quiet.
Amen to that. Now, Charlie, speaking of people who should just shut up, those rabid eco-zealots Just Stop Oil, unfortunately back in the headlines after one of their dim-witted members managed to avoid jail yesterday. So this is Alfred Beswick, who disrupted the lives of hard-working Brits when he climbed up an M25 gantry back in November. But the 26-year-old pleaded with the judge that the stunt had ruined his life and relationship, and the judge bought it, Charlie. So despite potentially putting lives at risk, Beswick was given a suspended sentence and avoided any jail time. That's wrong, isn't it?
Yes, of course it's wrong. Look, Dan, I wouldn't be saying that police can preempt these things, although they're perfectly capable of doing so because they're very good intelligence, but I don't think we need another law for it. What we do need is when these people are caught and prosecuted, charged and prosecuted with an offence, is that they're punished. And don't listen to some whinging, beardy twat who sat up in a bloody gantry for, however long it was and held up the traffic. He deserves a bit of a line. At the very least, he deserves some community service or whatever, But I don't know whether it was Crown Court or Magistrates Court, but magistrates have got a bit of previous on this. But what are we going to do with these bloody people? I mean, there was a guy on Twitter the other day, and he was being interviewed in a shopping centre or something, and he started on about, it wasn't stopping oil, but it was stopping something else, that we're killing the planet or something, and he just stood there and he said, ban all farming now! I mean, what are these...
I know. It's ludicrous.
Listening to these people.
It's ludicrous, Charlie. But look, one thing that shocked me this week, Ken Bruce announcing he's leaving the BBC. But is this to do with ageism? Well, Vanessa Fouts, who's also left Radio 2, thinks so. Watch.
I would imagine that it's a feeling of some sense of ageism at the BBC, that once you get over a certain age, your days are numbered, you're not valued in the same way, the music isn't as appealing because they've kind of changed the music at Radio 2 to appeal to the younger audience they're so desperate to get. It didn't have a bright future there.
Did you get a sense of this ageism at Radio 2?
Yes, I did.
Ageism behind it. I think she's right, Charlie Lawson. Do you?
Yes, I do. And whoever's in charge at White City or whoever else, and indeed, ITV to a lesser extent, but someone is making some really bum decisions here. You know what I mean? Listen, Paddy McGuinness would be a mate of mine, but I think even he, looking at the figures, when they got rid of Sue Barker, an established church, so to speak, and poor old Paddy's been handed this sort of poison chalice, and he's doing his best. But sure, who are the BBC trying to appeal to? Nobody bloody watches them under my generation anyway, for God's sake. You know what I mean? Whoever's running this company needs a good boot up the arse, because they can't see 2 feet in front of them. You know what I mean?
And actually, just back your legends. Back your legends, which is why we back you, Charlie Lawson. Thank you so much, and we will speak next week. But it's time now to reveal today's greatest Britain and Union jackass. Dominique Samuels, who's your GB nominee?
Mine is Oscar Burrow for climbing the height of Mount Everest to help raise money to help children at a local hospice to have holidays.
Sean Bailey, your nominee?
My nominee is MP Kemi Badenoch for making sure that any changes to the gender laws don't criminalise parents. Parents must be allowed to raise and look after their own children.
But we're not going to have another fight about it. Amy Nicole, your nominee?
Mine is Katie Montgomery, who, perhaps unlike me, calmly describes and unpacks trans issues, particularly in relation to the GRA reforms.
Well, I'm going to go for Kemi Badenoch as the greatest Briton on this, but Union jackass time now. Dominique, your nominee?
Mine's Jacinda Ardern for being a psycho tyrant.
Sean Bailey?
Mine's is Sadiq Khan for misleading Londoners about his ULEZ expansion.
Oh, let's have a look at this.
The Conservatives clearly do not care about our children developing permanently stunted lungs.
You are saying that I do not care about the air quality that my children breathe.
I'm the chair and you make comments through me.
That was a despicable comment, Mr. Carter.
He does it all the time.
Yeah,
he's always trying to tell
revolting.
people what we think because he's trying to cover his own tracks because he lied to Londoners.
If only you were in that role. You came so close. Amy Nicole, your nominee?
It's Rishi Sunak for demonstrating that laws are just for us little people.
Oh, it's a seatbelt.
Is this? Well, you've got to explain. He was caught on a video not wearing a seatbelt. The police are now saying they're investigating. How ludicrous! They must have more important things to do. They must have more important things to do.
If any of us got caught not wearing a seatbelt, we would not get away with it.
They wouldn't care.
Well, look, if you watched my digest at the start of the show, though, you will understand that, of course, tonight's Union jackass is Jacinda Ardern, the be kind tyrant. And you know what I say, Cindy? Bye-bye. Please don't come back.
Cindy.
Dominique Samuels, Sean Bailey, Amy Nicole. That was a very spicy show to end the week, but I enjoyed it. Thank you so much. I am, of course, back Monday night from 9 p.m. Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you for your company. Headliners next. Good night.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday